The morning light came through the bedroom curtains, but Rebecca didn't feel any warmth from it. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her packed suitcase hidden in the closet behind her winter coats. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. Today was the day. After 5 long years, she was finally leaving. Her hands were shaking as she touched the bruise on her arm. It was turning yellow now, almost healed. Just another mark that would fade away like all the others. But this time was different. This time something inside her had changed. She couldn't do this anymore. She wouldn't. The house was quiet. Too quiet. David was still sleeping down the hall in the guest room where he'd passed out last night, after another one of his angry episodes. She had maybe an hour before he woke up, maybe less. She needed to move fast. Rebecca stood up slowly, her legs feeling weak underneath her. She'd been planning this for 3 months. 3 months of secretly saving money from the grocery budget. 3 months of hiding $20 bills in the pages of old books. 3 months of telling herself that yes, she could actually do this. She could leave. She grabbed her suitcase and moved quietly down the stairs. Every creaking sound made her freeze. Every shadow made her think he was standing there blocking her way. But the house stayed silent. Just the sound of her breathing and the old clock ticking in the living room. Her phone was already in her hand. She'd called for a ride 10 minutes ago and the app said the car was 3 minutes away. 3 minutes felt like forever. She stood by the front door, her whole body tense, waiting for David to appear at the top of the stairs. Waiting for him to ask where she thought she was going. Waiting for everything to fall apart, but he didn't come. The car pulled up outside. Rebecca took one last look at the house that had been her prison for so long. She didn't feel sad. She didn't feel anything except the desperate need to get out. She opened the door and stepped into the cool morning air. Freedom had never felt so terrifying. At the airport, everything became a blur. She'd bought a ticket last night on her phone. Portland, Oregon. Her best friend from college, Lisa, lived there. Lisa had been begging her to visit for years, never knowing why Rebecca always said no. Never knowing that David wouldn't allow it. But Lisa had told her months ago in a careful phone call when David wasn't home that she would always have a place to stay, no questions asked. Rebecca rushed through security, her eyes constantly scanning the crowd. Part of her expected to see David running toward her, angry and threatening. Part of her expected him to grab her arm and drag her back home. But he wasn't there. She was alone. She was actually doing this. The airport was busy and confusing. People rushed in every direction with their luggage and their coffee cups and their normal lives. Rebecca envied them. They probably didn't know how lucky they were to just exist without fear, to just walk through an airport without their hands shaking. She looked at her phone for the gate number. C-12. Her flight was leaving in 30 minutes. She started running, weaving through the crowds, pulling her small suitcase behind her. She didn't have much with her. Just some clothes, her important documents, and the $3,000 she'd managed to save. Everything else she was leaving behind. None of it mattered anyway. Her phone buzzed. Her stomach dropped. A text from David. "Where are you?" She didn't answer. She just ran faster. The gate numbers flew past her. C-15, C-14, C-13. She was almost there. Her breath was coming in quick gasps now, partly from running and partly from pure panic. Another text came through. Then another. She didn't look. She couldn't look. Finally, she saw a gate with people boarding. A line of passengers moving slowly toward the airplane door. She glanced up at the sign. C-21, wait, that wasn't right. She looked at her phone again, squinting at the screen through her panicked tears. C-12. But she was so scared and so confused that her brain couldn't make sense of it. The numbers blurred together. This had to be it. This had to be her flight. She rushed to the gate agent and held out her phone with the boarding pass. The woman barely glanced at it and waved her through. Rebecca didn't question it. She just wanted to get on a plane. Any plane, as long as it took her far away from here. She walked down the narrow aisle of the aircraft, her suitcase bumping against the seats. Row 14, seat B. She found it and collapsed into the chair, finally letting herself breathe. She was on the plane. She was safe. David couldn't reach her here. The seat next to her was empty for now. She closed her eyes and tried to calm down. Her phone kept buzzing with more texts, more calls. She turned it to silent and shoved it into her bag. She didn't want to see his words. She didn't want to hear his voice. She just wanted this plane to take off and carry her away to her new life. Passengers continued boarding around her. a mother with 2 small children. A businessman in a suit, an elderly couple holding hands. Normal people living normal lives. Rebecca wondered if she would ever feel normal again. Someone stopped next to her row. "Excuse me, I think I'm in the window seat." Rebecca looked up. A man, probably in his late 30s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He didn't look threatening. He didn't look angry. He just looked tired, like someone who understood what it meant to carry heavy things. She stood up to let him pass, and he settled into seat A, placing his bag under the seat in front of him. "Thanks," he said quietly. Then he pulled out a book and started reading, giving her space. Rebecca felt herself relax just slightly. At least her seatmate wasn't chatty or intrusive. She stared out the window, watching the ground crew load luggage into the plane. Every minute that passed was a minute further from David. Every minute was a small victory. The plane's engines started up. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration. Rebecca barely heard any of it. She just kept thinking, "I did it. I actually did it." "I got out," the pilot's voice came over the speaker. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard Flight 447 with service to Miami, Florida." Rebecca's heart stopped. Miami? Her flight was supposed to go to Portland. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and pulled up her boarding pass. Gate C12 to Portland. She looked up at the seat number above her head. Row 14. She looked around wildly at the other passengers, then at the safety card in the seat pocket, Miami. No. She was on the wrong plane. The plane started moving away from the gate, rolling slowly toward the runway. Panic flooded through her body. She started to stand up, but her seatbelt held her down. What should she do? Should she tell someone? Would they turn the plane around? First time running away? The man in the window seat was looking at her now, his voice low and understanding. His eyes weren't judging her. They were just seeing her. Really seeing her. Rebecca stared at him, tears starting to fill her eyes. How did he know? Could he see it written all over her face? Could he see how broken she was? The plane turned onto the runway. The engines roared louder. And as they lifted off the ground, Rebecca realized something strange. Maybe Miami was exactly where she needed to go. Maybe being on the wrong plane was the first right choice she'd made in 5 years. She took a deep breath and looked at the stranger beside her. "Yeah," she whispered. "First time?" He nodded slowly, a small sad smile on his face. "It gets easier," he said. "Not right away, but eventually." The plane climbed higher into the sky, carrying Rebecca away from everything she'd known. Away from David and the house and the fear, toward something unknown. Toward Miami, and a stranger with kind eyes, and maybe, just maybe, toward the beginning of something better. The plane leveled off in the sky, and Rebecca felt like she could finally breathe again. She was thousands of feet above the ground now. David couldn't reach her here. Not on this plane. Not in this moment. For the first time in years, she was completely out of his control. The man in the window seat hadn't said anything else after his initial question. He just went back to his book, giving her space to process everything. Rebecca appreciated that. She'd spent so long with someone who demanded her attention every second that this quiet companionship felt like a gift. She wiped her eyes and tried to pull herself together. The flight attendant came by with drinks. Rebecca asked for water with hands that were still trembling slightly. The man next to her ordered coffee. Black, no sugar. Something about that simple choice made him seem trustworthy. People who drank black coffee usually didn't pretend to be something they weren't. After the flight attendant moved on, the silence between them stretched out. Not uncomfortable, just present. Rebecca stared at the clouds outside the window, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. What was she going to do in Miami? She didn't know anyone there. She had $3,000 and a suitcase full of clothes. That was it. That was her entire new life. "I'm Thomas, by the way," the man said suddenly, closing his book. "And I promise I'm not trying to be weird or intrusive. But you look like someone who could use a friend right now, or at least someone to talk to who isn't going to judge you." Rebecca turned to look at him, really look at him. He had tired eyes, the kind that came from carrying grief for a long time. His wedding ring was gone, but she could see the faint tan line where it used to be. He'd lost someone. She could tell. "Rebecca," she said quietly, "and yeah, I could probably use someone to talk to. I just don't really know where to start." Thomas smiled gently. "Start wherever feels right." Or don't start at all. Sometimes sitting in silence with another person is enough. Something about his words made the tight knot in Rebecca's chest loosen just a little bit. She took a sip of her water and decided to trust this stranger. What did she have to lose? Her old life was already gone. I left my husband this morning, she said, the words coming out in a rush. I got on the wrong plane because I was panicking. I was supposed to go to Portland, but I ended up here, going to Miami. I don't know anyone in Miami. I don't have a plan. I just knew I had to leave. Thomas nodded slowly, not looking surprised or shocked, just understanding. How long were you with him? 5 years. 5 years too long. Rebecca's voice cracked. I kept thinking it would get better. That he would change. That maybe I was the problem, and if I just tried harder, everything would be okay. But it never was. It just kept getting worse. That's not your fault, Thomas said firmly. Whatever happened, whatever he did to you, none of it was your fault. You know that, right? Rebecca felt tears starting to form again. Nobody had said those words to her in so long. David had always made everything her fault. Her fault for making him angry. Her fault for not understanding him. Her fault for being too sensitive. Hearing someone say it wasn't her fault felt like being handed a lifeline. I'm still learning to believe that, she whispered. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Thomas started talking, his voice soft and reflective. I lost my wife 3 years ago, he said. Cancer. She fought for 2 years and I watched her get smaller and weaker every day until she just wasn't there anymore. Her name was Jennifer. She was the best person I ever knew. Rebecca's heart ached for him. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Thomas stared down at his coffee cup. After she died, I just shut down. I threw myself into work. I'm an architect. And I just kept designing buildings and taking on projects and filling every hour of every day so I wouldn't have to feel anything. I designed structures for other people but forgot how to build my own life back up. Is that why you're going to Miami? Rebecca asked. Thomas nodded. I sold my practice in Seattle. A company in Miami offered me a project I couldn't refuse. But honestly, I think I'm just running too. Running from memories. Running from the empty house. Running from the life Jennifer and I were supposed to have together. Rebecca understood that kind of running. Different reasons, different pain, but the same desperate need to escape. So we're both running away, she said with a sad smile. That's something we have in common. Maybe, Thomas said. Or maybe we're running towards something. We just don't know what it is yet. They talked for the next hour. Really talked. Rebecca found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone. About how David had slowly isolated her from her friends and family. How he'd convinced her to quit her job because he said he wanted to take care of her. How the control had started small and grown bigger until she couldn't even choose what to eat for dinner without asking permission. Thomas listened to all of it without interrupting. Without offering empty platitudes or trying to fix anything, he just heard her. And that meant more than he probably realized. In turn, Thomas told her about Jennifer, about their dreams of traveling the world together, about how she'd made him promise in her final days that he would keep living, that he wouldn't let grief turn him into a ghost. He'd broken that promise for 3 years. But now, finally, he was trying to honor it. Jennifer had a best friend named Carmen, Thomas said as they started their descent into Miami. She runs a place for women who are leaving dangerous situations, a safe house. Carmen and Jennifer started planning it together before Jennifer got sick, and Carmen made it happen after she passed. It's a good place. A safe place. Rebecca's heart started beating faster. Why are you telling me this? Because you need somewhere to go. Somewhere safe where you can figure out your next steps. And Carmen asks no questions. She just helps. Thomas pulled out his phone and wrote something on a note. Here's her number, and here's mine. I'm not trying to be a hero or save you or anything like that. You're already saving yourself. I'm just offering a hand if you need one. Rebecca took the phone number with shaking hands. A safe house. Somewhere to go that wasn't a hotel where David might eventually track her down. Somewhere with people who understood. Why are you helping me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't even know me. Thomas looked at her with those tired, kind eyes. Because 3 years ago I sat in a hospital room and watched my wife die. And in her last hour she made me promise something. She said, Thomas, if you ever meet someone who needs help, help them. Don't look away. Don't tell yourself it's not your business. Just help. So that's what I'm doing. I'm keeping a promise to someone who deserves to be remembered. Rebecca felt something break open inside her chest, not in a painful way, but in the way that light breaks through darkness. This stranger on a plane was offering her kindness with no strings attached, no demands, no expectations, just simple human compassion. "Thank you," she said, and the words felt inadequate for what she was feeling. "Thank you so much." The plane touched down in Miami. The Florida sun was bright through the windows. Rebecca gathered her things, her mind spinning with possibilities. She hadn't planned to come to Miami. She hadn't planned any of this. But maybe that was okay. Maybe sometimes the best plans were the ones you didn't make. As they walked off the plane together, Thomas turned to her one more time. "Call Carmen today. Don't wait. Don't second-guess yourself. And, Rebecca, you're braver than you think. You got on that plane this morning. That took more courage than most people have in their entire lives." Rebecca watched him walk toward baggage claim, this stranger who had somehow become a friend in just a few hours. She pulled out her phone and stared at the number he'd given her. Her hands were still shaking, but not from fear anymore. From something else, something that almost felt like hope. She took a deep breath and made the call. A woman with a warm, accented voice answered on the second ring. "Hello, this is Carmen." "Hi," Rebecca said, her voice stronger than she expected. "My name is Rebecca. A friend gave me your number. I think I need help." "Then you've come to the right place, sweetheart," Carmen said gently. "Tell me where you are and I'll come get you. You're safe now. I promise you're safe." Rebecca stood in the Miami airport surrounded by strangers thousands of miles from the life she'd escaped. And for the first time in 5 years, she actually believed it. She was safe. She was free. And somehow, boarding the wrong plane had led her exactly where she needed to be. Carmen's house was painted a soft coral color, with white shutters and a garden full of bright flowers. It sat in a quiet neighborhood where palm trees lined the streets and the air smelled like jasmine. Rebecca stood on the front porch with her suitcase, her heart pounding as she waited for someone to answer the door. When Carmen opened it, Rebecca felt an immediate sense of relief. The woman was in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that sparkled with warmth and strength. She looked at Rebecca the way a mother looks at a child who's been lost too long. "Come in, sweetheart," Carmen said, pulling Rebecca into a hug before she could even introduce herself properly. "You're home now." The house was full of light and life. Rebecca could hear voices from other rooms, the sound of women talking and laughing. The smell of something delicious cooking came from the kitchen. It felt nothing like a shelter. It felt like a real home. Carmen led Rebecca to a small bedroom on the second floor. It had a single bed with a colorful quilt, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the garden. "Simple and clean and safe. This is yours for as long as you need it," Carmen said. "No rent, no time limits. Just a place to rest and figure out your next step. There are 6 other women staying here right now. Some have children. Everyone has a story. Nobody asks questions unless you want to share." Rebecca set her suitcase down and felt her legs go weak. She sat on the bed and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for years. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice cracking. Carmen sat down beside her and took her hand. "You don't have to thank me. You just have to promise me one thing. Promise me you'll take care of yourself. Rest when you need to rest. Cry when you need to cry. And when you're ready, start building the life you deserve." "Can you do that?" Rebecca nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I can try. That's all any of us can do, honey. Just try." The first week passed in a blur. Rebecca mostly stayed in her room, trying to process everything that had happened. The other women in the house respected her space but let her know they were there if she needed anything. One woman, Valerie, had left her husband 2 years ago and now worked as a nurse. Another, Kim, was learning to be a hairdresser. They were all at different stages of rebuilding their lives. Rebecca knew she needed to find work. Her $3,000 wouldn't last forever. On her 8th day in Miami, she walked into a small bookshop in a neighborhood called Coconut Grove. The shop was called Chapter 2, and it was exactly the kind of place Rebecca had always loved. Wooden shelves packed with books, cozy reading corners, and the smell of old paper and coffee. An elderly man stood behind the counter, sorting through a stack of new arrivals. He looked up when she entered and smiled. "Can I help you find something?" he asked. "Actually, I'm looking for work," Rebecca said, her voice nervous. I know you probably aren't hiring, but I love books and I'm good with people and I just thought I'd ask. The man studied her for a moment. He had the kind of eyes that saw more than most people, eyes that recognized someone who needed a chance. What's your name? He asked. Rebecca. I'm Mr. Chen. I've owned this shop for 32 years. He paused, still looking at her thoughtfully. Can you start Monday? Rebecca blinked in surprise. Really? Just like that? Just like that, Mr. Chen said. Everyone deserves a second chapter. That's why I named this place what I did. Be here at 9 in the morning. Wear comfortable shoes. And Rebecca, whatever you're running from, you don't have to talk about it. Your past is your business. I only care about who you are now. Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes again. She seemed to cry a lot these days, but these were different tears. These were grateful tears. She started work on Monday and quickly fell into a rhythm. The bookshop was peaceful and calm. Mr. Chen was a gentle boss who asked nothing more than honest work and kindness to customers. Rebecca helped people find books, organize shelves, and sometimes just listen to customers talk about their lives. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. She'd earned it herself. Thomas had texted her a few times since they landed in Miami, just checking in, making sure she was okay. He never pushed for anything more than friendship. Never made her feel uncomfortable or pressured. After 2 weeks, he invited her for coffee at a small cafe near the beach. Rebecca was nervous as she walked to meet him. She hadn't spent time alone with a man who wasn't David in so long. What if she didn't know how to have a normal conversation anymore? What if she was too broken to be a good friend? But when she saw Thomas sitting at an outdoor table, reading a book and sipping his coffee, those fears melted away a little. He looked up and smiled, and it was the same kind, tired smile from the airplane. Hey, he said. Thanks for coming. I wasn't sure if you would. Thanks for inviting me, Rebecca said, sitting down across from him. I've been wanting to say thank you again. For everything. For Carmen's number and just for being kind when I really needed it. You don't have to keep thanking me, Thomas said. I'm just glad you're doing okay. Are you doing okay? Rebecca thought about the question. Was she okay? She was living in a safe house with money running out. She was working at a bookshop for minimum wage. She was thousands of miles from everything she'd ever known, but she wasn't afraid every second of every day anymore. She wasn't walking on eggshells or hiding bruises or wondering when the next explosion would come. I think I'm getting there, she said honestly. Some days are really hard, but some days are actually good. That's new for me. They talked for over an hour. Thomas told her about the project he was working on in Miami. He was designing a community center for survivors of difficult situations. A place that would have job training, therapy rooms, childcare, and art studios, all funded by a foundation he'd created in Jennifer's name. She always wanted to help people, Thomas said, his voice soft with memory. She used to volunteer at women's shelters before she got sick. This center is my way of keeping her dream alive. She would be proud of you, Rebecca said. I don't know her, but I can tell she would be. I hope so. Thomas looked out at the ocean. Some days I feel like I'm doing okay, you know? Like I'm actually living again instead of just existing. And then other days the grief just hits me out of nowhere and I feel like I'm drowning all over again. Rebecca understood that feeling completely. That's how it is for me, too. Except instead of grief, it's fear. I'll be doing something totally normal, like organizing books at the shop, and suddenly I'll panic thinking David found me, that he's going to walk through the door and drag me back. Has he tried to contact you? Thomas asked, concern crossing his face. Rebecca's stomach tightened. Yeah. He's been calling and texting nonstop from different numbers. I blocked him, but he just gets new phones. The messages are all the same. Sometimes he's sorry and begging me to come back. Sometimes he's angry and threatening. I'm trying to ignore them, but it's hard. Have you talked to the police? Carmen helped me file for a restraining order last week. I don't know if it'll do anything, but at least there's something official on record now. Thomas reached across the table and squeezed her hand briefly before pulling back. Not invasive, just supportive. Good, that's good. And if you ever feel unsafe, you call me, okay? Anytime, day or night. Rebecca felt that unfamiliar warmth in her chest again. The feeling of being cared about, of mattering to someone without having to earn it or prove her worth. Over the next month, coffee with Thomas became a regular thing. Once a week, they'd meet at the same cafe and talk about everything and nothing. He told her about his architecture projects. She told him about the interesting customers at the bookshop. Neither of them pushed for anything more than friendship, and that felt right. They were both still healing, both still figuring out who they were after loss. One afternoon, Thomas invited Rebecca to see the community center he was designing. They drove to the construction site, and he showed her the blueprints, explaining each room with enthusiasm she hadn't seen from him before. He came alive when he talked about his work. "This space here will be for art therapy," he said, pointing to a large room with floor-to-ceiling windows. "And this area is for job training. Computer skills, resume writing, interview practice. Everything someone needs to start over." Rebecca looked at the plans and felt something shift inside her. This building was for people like her. Women who'd escaped. People who were rebuilding their lives from scratch. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Of course. Do you think I could ever go back to school? I had 2 years of college before I met David. He convinced me to drop out. I've always wondered if it's too late." Thomas looked at her with such genuine surprise. "Too late? Rebecca, you're 27 years old. It's not even close to too late. What would you want to study?" "I don't know. Maybe something like what you do, creating spaces where people feel safe and welcome. I never thought about architecture before, but seeing your passion for it makes me wonder." "You'd be incredible at it," Thomas said firmly. "You have an eye for these things. I can tell." As the sun set over the construction site, Rebecca felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She felt hopeful. Not just surviving day-to-day hopeful, but actually dreaming about the future hopeful. But that night, as she walked back to Carmen's house, her phone rang from an unknown number. Her stomach dropped. She knew who it was before she even answered. "Rebecca." David's voice made her whole body tense. "We need to talk." Her hands started shaking, but she kept walking. "I have nothing to say to you. You think you can just leave me? You think you can just disappear?" His voice was rising now, angry and threatening. "I know you're in Miami. I hired someone to find you. And when I get there, you're going to regret ever walking out that door." Rebecca hung up and immediately called the police. Then she called Thomas. The fear had found her again. But this time she wasn't facing it alone. Thomas arrived at Carmen's house 15 minutes after Rebecca called him. The police had already been there, taking her statement and adding David's threat to the restraining order file. Carmen sat with Rebecca in the living room, holding her hand while she tried to stop shaking. When Thomas walked through the door, Rebecca felt a wave of relief wash over her. He sat down on the other side of her, not touching, just present. Solid and steady when everything else felt like it was falling apart. "We're going to keep you safe," Carmen said firmly. "That man is not getting anywhere near you. I've dealt with situations like this before. We have security cameras now. The police know the situation. And you're not alone in this house. There are 7 of us here who will look out for you." Rebecca nodded, trying to believe her. But the fear was so deep inside her bones. David had always been good at finding ways to get what he wanted. He was charming when he needed to be. Convincing. People always believed him over her. "I should have changed my number," Rebecca whispered. "I should have been more careful." "This isn't your fault," Thomas said, his voice gentle but firm. "None of this is your fault. He's the one making threats. He's the one who won't let go. You did everything right." Over the next few days, Rebecca barely slept. Every sound made her jump. Every time the door opened at the bookshop, her heart would race, thinking it might be David walking in. Mr. Chen noticed her anxiety and quietly installed a panic button under the counter, connected directly to the police station. He didn't make a big deal about it, just showed her where it was and went back to sorting books. Thomas started checking in more often. A text in the morning, a call during lunch, not smothering, just making sure she knew someone was thinking about her, that someone cared whether she was okay. One evening, about a week after David's threatening call, Rebecca was closing up the bookshop when she noticed a man across the street. He was standing by a parked car watching the shop. Watching her. Her blood ran cold. It wasn't David, but something about the way he was looking at her made her certain he was connected to David somehow. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands and took a picture of the man and his car. Then she called the police and locked herself inside the bookshop. Mr. Chen had already gone home, so she was alone. The man stayed across the street for another 10 minutes before getting in his car and driving away. When the police arrived, Rebecca showed them the photo. They confirmed what she'd suspected. The car was registered to a private investigation company. David had hired someone to watch her, to follow her, to report back on where she lived and worked and who she spent time with. The officer, a woman named Detective Rodriguez, looked at Rebecca with serious eyes. This escalates things. He's not just making phone calls anymore. He's actively tracking you. We're going to increase patrols in this area, and I want you to be very careful. Don't go anywhere alone if you can help it. Change up your routines. And if you see this man again, call us immediately. Rebecca felt like she was living in a nightmare. She'd escaped. She'd run thousands of miles away. She'd started a new life. But David was still controlling everything, still making her afraid to simply exist. Thomas picked her up from the police station that night. They sat in his car outside Carmen's house for a long time, neither of them speaking. Finally, Rebecca broke the silence. "I'm so tired," she said, and the exhaustion in her voice was about more than just lack of sleep. "I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. I'm tired of letting him have this much power over me even when he's not here." "Then let's do something about it," Thomas said. "Not something reckless, but something that gives you back some control." He drove her to his lawyer's office the next morning. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Patterson, had experience with cases like Rebecca's. She explained the options clearly and without judgment. "We can file for divorce while the restraining order is in place," Ms. Patterson said. "We can also pursue charges for harassment and stalking based on the phone calls and the private investigator. It won't be easy. He'll fight it. But you have documentation now. Police reports, witnesses, you're not alone in this." Rebecca felt something shift inside her. For so long she'd been running and hiding, reacting to David's actions instead of taking her own. But this felt different. This felt like fighting back. "Let's do it," she said. "All of it. I want the divorce. I want the charges filed. I want my life back," Ms. Patterson smiled. "Then let's get started." The next few weeks were hard in a different way. There were court dates and paperwork and phone calls with lawyers. David fought everything just like Ms. Patterson predicted. He claimed Rebecca had abandoned him without cause, that she was mentally unstable, that she'd stolen money from their joint account. All lies, but lies he told with confidence. But Rebecca had something now that she didn't have before. She had people on her side. Carmen testified about the state Rebecca was in when she first arrived. Mr. Chen wrote a letter about her character and work ethic. Detective Rodriguez provided documentation of the threats and stalking. And Thomas offered to cover the legal fees when Rebecca's money started running out. "You can pay me back when you're on your feet," he said when she protested, "or don't pay me back at all." Jennifer would have wanted me to help. And honestly, so do I. Rebecca looked at this man who'd been a stranger just a few months ago, who'd sat beside her on a plane and somehow become one of the most important people in her life. She wanted to tell him what that meant to her, how his kindness had helped her believe she was worth saving, but the words felt too big, too heavy. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." One afternoon, Thomas invited Rebecca to the community center construction site again. The building was really taking shape now. Walls were up. Windows were being installed. She could actually see what the space would become. "I want to show you something," Thomas said, leading her to what would eventually be the job training center. "I've been thinking about what you said, about wanting to go back to school, about being interested in architecture." He pulled out a tablet and showed her information about a local community college with a great architecture program. "They have night classes. You could work during the day and study at night. And Carmen told me you could stay at her place as long as you need. What do you think?" Rebecca stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Going back to school felt impossible. She was barely keeping her head above water as it was, but it also felt like exactly what she needed. A goal, a future, something to work toward that was hers and hers alone. "I think I'm scared," she said honestly. "What if I fail? What if I'm not smart enough anymore?" "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met," Thomas said. "You left an impossible situation with nothing but a suitcase and $3,000. You built a life from scratch in a city where you knew no one. You're fighting a legal battle against someone who tried to destroy you. If you can do all that, you can absolutely handle some college classes." Rebecca felt tears forming again, but they were good tears, hopeful tears. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I'll apply." That evening, Rebecca sat in her small room at Carmen's house and filled out the college application. It felt surreal, typing in her information and writing an essay about why she wanted to study architecture. She wrote about creating safe spaces, about buildings that welcomed people instead of trapping them, about turning pain into purpose. When she hit submit, she felt lighter than she had in months. But that lightness shattered 2 days later when she arrived at work to find David standing outside the bookshop. Not the private investigator. David himself. He'd flown to Miami. He'd found her. Rebecca froze on the sidewalk, her whole body going rigid with fear. David saw her and started walking toward her, his face a mixture of anger and false concern. "Rebecca, please," he called out. "We need to talk. I came all this way to see you." Every instinct told her to run, but something else, something new that had been growing inside her over the past few months, told her to stand her ground. She pulled out her phone and started recording. "You're violating a restraining order," she said, her voice shaking but loud. "The police are already on their way. You need to leave." "Don't be ridiculous," David said, still approaching. "I'm your husband. I have a right to talk to you. You're not my husband anymore. I filed for divorce, and you have no rights over me. Not anymore." People on the street were starting to notice the confrontation. Mr. Chen came out of the bookshop and stood next to Rebecca, silent but protective. A woman across the street pulled out her phone and started recording too. David's mask slipped. The charm fell away and the anger she knew so well flashed across his face. "You ungrateful," but he didn't get to finish. 2 police cars pulled up and Detective Rodriguez stepped out. She'd been nearby on patrol, having increased surveillance in the area just for this reason. "Sir, you need to come with us," she said firmly. "You're in violation of a restraining order." David tried to argue, tried to charm his way out of it. But there were too many witnesses now. Too much evidence. The police handcuffed him and put him in the back of the car while Rebecca watched, her whole body trembling. Detective Rodriguez walked over to her. "Are you okay?" Rebecca nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I am." As the police car drove away with David inside, Rebecca felt something she hadn't expected. Not relief, not joy, but something quieter. Something that felt like closure. She'd stood her ground. She hadn't run. She'd faced him and she'd won. Thomas arrived 20 minutes later, having gotten her emergency call. He found her sitting inside the bookshop with Mr. Chen, drinking tea and slowly coming down from the adrenaline. "You were incredibly brave," Thomas said, sitting beside her. "I was terrified," Rebecca admitted. "Brave and terrified aren't opposites," Thomas said gently. "Brave is being terrified and doing it anyway, and that's exactly what you did." Rebecca looked at him, this kind man who'd helped her find her strength again, and she realized something. She was falling for him, not in the desperate, dependent way she'd fallen for David, but in a healthy, grateful, genuine way. She wasn't ready for anything more than friendship yet. Maybe she wouldn't be ready for a long time. But the feeling was there, warm and real. "What happens now?" she asked. Thomas smiled. "Now you keep living. You go to that college class when the semester starts. You keep working at the bookshop. You heal at your own pace, and when you're ready for whatever comes next, you'll know." Rebecca nodded. For the first time since boarding that wrong plane, she actually believed in her future. Not just surviving, but truly living. 6 months after boarding the wrong plane, Rebecca stood in front of a mirror in her new apartment. It was small, just a studio with a tiny kitchen and a view of a parking lot. But it was hers. She'd signed the lease 2 weeks ago with money she'd saved from the bookshop and a small settlement from the divorce. David had finally signed the papers after spending a week in jail for violating the restraining order. He'd agreed to everything just to be done with it. Just to move on to whatever came next in his life. Rebecca didn't care what came next for him. That part of her story was over. She adjusted her backpack, filled with notebooks and textbooks for her architecture classes. Tonight was the start of her second semester at community college. She'd finished her first semester with straight A's, something that still surprised her. Turned out she was smart. Turned out she was capable. She just needed the chance to prove it to herself. The community center Thomas designed was having its grand opening today. Rebecca had promised to stop by after class. Over the past few months, she'd watched the building transform from blueprints to an actual place where real people would rebuild their lives. It felt symbolic somehow, like watching her own transformation happen in concrete and glass. Her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Good luck on your first day back. You're going to do amazing." Rebecca smiled and typed back a quick thank you. Their friendship had deepened over the months, growing into something steady and comfortable. They met for coffee every week. Sometimes he'd help her with her architecture homework, explaining concepts in ways that made sense. Sometimes they'd just walk on the beach and talk about nothing important. He never pushed for more, and neither did she. They were both still healing, both still learning how to be whole people on their own. But Rebecca couldn't deny that her feelings for him had grown. The way her heart sped up when she saw his name on her phone. The way she found herself thinking about him at random moments. The way his smile made her feel safe and seen in equal measure. She wasn't sure what to do about those feelings. After David, the idea of being with someone else terrified her. What if she made another mistake? What if she couldn't trust her own judgment anymore? What if she was too damaged to love someone in a healthy way? Carmen had told her those fears were normal. "Healing isn't linear, sweetheart," she'd said over tea one evening. "Some days you'll feel strong and ready for anything. Other days you'll feel like you're back at square one. Both are okay. Both are part of the journey." Rebecca arrived at her class and took a seat near the front. The professor, Dr. Williams, was a woman in her 50s who'd designed buildings all over the world. She started the lecture by asking each student why they wanted to become architects. When it was Rebecca's turn, she took a deep breath. "I want to design spaces where people feel safe," she said. "Where they feel like they belong. Like they matter. I think buildings can do that. I think the spaces we create can heal people." Dr. Williams smiled warmly. "That's exactly right. Welcome to architecture." After class, Rebecca drove to the community center. The parking lot was full of cars, and she could hear music and voices coming from inside. She walked through the front doors and stopped, taking it all in. The space was beautiful. Light poured in through tall windows. The walls were painted in soft, welcoming colors. There were comfortable chairs and conversation areas. Art hung on the walls, created by the women who'd already started using the center. Everything about the space said, "You are welcome here. You are safe here." Carmen found her first, pulling her into a tight hug. "Can you believe this place? It's everything we dreamed of and more." Valerie and Kim from Carmen's house were there too, both of them volunteers now, helping other women navigate their own escapes and fresh starts. They'd become like sisters to Rebecca over the months. People who understood without her having to explain. Thomas appeared from the crowd, looking nervous and proud at the same time. He was giving a speech in a few minutes, dedicating the center in Jennifer's memory. "You made it," he said, his face lighting up when he saw Rebecca. "I wouldn't miss this," she said. "Thomas, this place is incredible." "You really did it." "We did it," he corrected. "All of us. This wasn't just me." Rebecca watched him walk to the small stage set up in the main room. He spoke about Jennifer, about her passion for helping others, about how she'd wanted to create a place where people could rebuild their lives with dignity and support. His voice cracked a few times, but he kept going, his love for his late wife clear in every word. When he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The afternoon turned into evening. Rebecca helped serve food and talked with women who'd just arrived at the center, some of them still shaking with fear and adrenaline. She recognized herself in their faces, that same terror, that same desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, they could survive this. "It gets easier," she told a young woman named Melissa, who'd left her boyfriend just 2 days ago. "Not right away, but slowly, one day at a time, and you don't have to do it alone." As the crowd thinned and people started heading home, Rebecca found herself on the center's rooftop terrace with Thomas. The Miami sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The city stretched out below them, full of possibility. "I have something to tell you," Thomas said, turning to face her, "and I don't want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable. I just need to say it." Rebecca's heart started pounding. "Okay. That day on the plane when you sat down next to me, I was going to Chicago, not Miami. I saw you panic when you realized you were on the wrong flight, and I couldn't leave you alone, so I changed my plans. I canceled my meetings. I rebooked everything. I stayed on that plane because I could see you needed someone." Rebecca stared at him in shock. "You changed your whole trip? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it wasn't about me," Thomas said simply. "It was about making sure you were safe. And then I got to know you, and you became one of the most important people in my life. But I've been holding back because I didn't want to complicate your healing. I didn't want to be another man making demands on you." Rebecca felt tears forming. "Thomas, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you that I care about you, more than care about you. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready for something more than friendship, I'll be here. But if you're not, that's okay too. Your friendship means everything to me. I don't want to lose that." Rebecca looked at this man who'd changed his entire life path because a stranger on a plane looked scared, who'd given her resources and support without expecting anything in return, who'd become her safe place in a world that had felt so dangerous. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm scared I don't know how to be with someone in a healthy way. I'm scared I'll see David in every disagreement. I'm scared I'm too broken." "You're not broken," Thomas said firmly. "You're healing. There's a difference. And I'm not David. I would never hurt you. I would never try to control you. I would just try my best to love you in a way that makes you feel free." Rebecca took a deep breath. This was terrifying. Opening her heart again felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. But she'd done so many terrifying things over the past 6 months. She'd left. She'd started over. She'd stood up to David. She'd gone back to school. She'd rebuilt herself from nothing. Maybe this was just one more scary thing she could do. "I'm not ready for anything serious," she said slowly. "I might not be ready for a long time. But I care about you too. And maybe we could just see where things go, slowly?" Thomas smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. Slowly sounds perfect. He reached for her hand and she let him take it. His touch was gentle, safe. Nothing like the grip that used to make her wince. They stood there together as the last light faded from the sky. Two people who'd been lost finding their way back to living. Not perfect, not healed completely, but healing, growing, moving forward. Rebecca thought about the woman who'd packed a suitcase in secret and run away in the early morning. That woman had been brave but terrified, desperate but determined. She'd boarded the wrong plane by accident but somehow ended up exactly where she needed to be. "Thank you," she told Thomas, squeezing his hand. "For what?" "For being in seat 14A, for staying on the plane, for showing me what kindness looks like, for helping me remember who I am." Thomas squeezed back. "Thank you for sitting in 14B, for being brave enough to start over, for letting me be part of your story." Rebecca looked out at Miami, this city that had become her home. She thought about Carmen's house and Mr. Chen's bookshop and her tiny apartment and her college classes. She thought about the divorce papers signed and the restraining order that kept her safe, and the future she was building one day at a time. She'd escaped a toxic marriage. She'd boarded the wrong plane. She'd sat beside a mysterious man who became her friend and maybe someday something more. But the real story was simpler than all of that. She'd survived. She'd saved herself. And now she was learning what it meant to truly live. Not just exist. Not just get through each day. But actually live with hope and purpose and dreams for tomorrow. The wrong plane had been the right choice all along. Sometimes the best destinations are the ones you never planned to reach. Sometimes getting lost is the only way to find yourself. Rebecca smiled up at the stars starting to appear in the darkening sky. She was exactly where she was meant to be. And for the first time in 5 years, she was free. Really, truly free. And that freedom felt like coming home.